Hi, my name is Layla Perry, and you're watching Under the Covers, my show about the risks taken, the mountains climbed, and the victories behind some of the biggest game changers shaping culture and entertainment today. Neil Mandt is a 5-time Emmy Award-winning producer who has sold movies and TV shows to every major conglomerate. He is a Hollywood legend, best known for producing more than 3,000 episodes of network television, including 10 feature films. Neil is also a pioneer in the field of augmented reality. He's a creator of Crime Door, which is the #1 true crime network with AR and VR and AI content. So cool. And was also the first to produce the Super Bowl in VR. Huge. In addition to his work in television and film, Neil is also a successful businessman. He co-founded a professional MMA league in China and is the member of a prestigious Explorers Club. Welcome to Under the Covers, Neil. Clap,
Thanks
clap,
for
clap.
having me. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
So the show, like I said, is about the risks taken and the mindset behind people who have just defied all odds and become incredibly successful in their field. And to win 1 Emmy is a huge accolade, but to win 5 is like the proof is in the pudding. So I want to go back to when you were a kid. Was this what you set out to do? What was your childhood like? Like, how did you end up getting into the world of film and TV?
Yeah, I mean, broadly, yes, I wanted to be in the television and entertainment business. I grew up in Michigan in the suburb of Detroit.
Okay.
I tell people, I say, pick your John Hughes movie from the 80s, and I lived in a similar neighborhood.
Wow.
You know, like where, Ferris Bueller was and Pretty in Pink, Breakfast Club, all that kind of Midwestern suburb of a city. That's where I grew up, in a very similar environment. And I was the same age as those characters. Mm-hmm. So as Molly Ringwald and those people were aging, I was aging along with them. So that's my environment. There was no Hollywood. There was no Wall Street, no technology, no entrepreneurship, none of that. Mm-hmm. And even the word entrepreneur was barely even being used at all. And when I would hear it, it sounded like somebody who was just making up whatever they did. I was like, it sounded like just a fancy name for unemployed. I'm an entrepreneur. And I was like, nah, that guy's unemployed. That doesn't seem like good because you didn't know of any successful people.
Which technically they are unemployed because they are their own employer. But
yeah.
yes.
But as like an 8-year-old and a 9-year-old, with the few times I heard that word, I was like, that guy's a sucker. That because entrepreneurship was not celebrated in our culture. It was not. What
was a standard job? Like what was the path that you thought that was expected of you?
The regular stuff, doctor, lawyer, someone in the auto business. I mean, in Detroit, I saw auto business all around me and all of the adjacent businesses to that. And many of the people I knew, their family, their parents, and other people had worked in the auto business. So I knew that. I knew what the auto business sort of meant to me. And again, at a young age, I was able to separate this from what was going on in the real world, which was, yes, this town is heavily auto-centric, but there are other towns that are heavily industry-centric to whatever that industry would be. And so I could see the regional components of the U.S. as a 7, 8, 9-year-old for some reason. And I thought all of that, in my sense, it kind of felt localized, which it was. And then it would be regionalized, and you'd be doing this business that would affect the region. Well, Hollywood was global, and I liked that idea of something that was global, and it wasn't the same thing over and over. If you're in the auto business, 50, 60 years, it's pretty, you're doing the same thing. You wouldn't be changing that much. It's like, oh, maybe a computer landed on your desk one day. But other than that, you're still making cars. Mm-hmm. The ways content has been made over the years is so different, and not just the machinery you use, whether it's AI or it's an airy camera. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, short form content, what we have now. That didn't exist 30 years ago. We were in black and white TV and then being colored TV. And then suddenly the news is in the living room with the Vietnam War and reality. It's just like so many things change. And so I like that idea of always being able to reinvent what I was doing from a content perspective.
Yeah.
I didn't understand the fact that what the person who would do that would be an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. I didn't understand that because that word, again, wasn't really used. We hadn't seen anyone be entrepreneurs. The greatest entrepreneur that I think existed that I was aware of at the time, but he wasn't referred to as an entrepreneur. He was referred to in a negative way was Hugh Hefner.
Huh.
Like back when I was a kid, it was like he was still in this sort of boxed corner as he's a a strange disruptor, not even a great disruptor, who has changed and made acceptance of sexuality a whole different level. I mean, without you remove Hugh Hefner from the discussion, and we're in a whole different world as to what we accept with each other in that subject matter. But he was an excellent entrepreneur, and I didn't see all of that. He was a media guy. And then as I got into my teenage years and I started producing stuff, I realized, okay, what I want to be is a media entrepreneur. And as I've gone through life, I've continuously changed course. Like, so I did some acting as a young kid, and then
in Detroit.
I was doing commercials at 10. I'd got myself into the business.
Wow.
And then I was commuting.
Well, when you say you got yourself into the business at 10 years old, does that mean that your mom signed you up for a commercial agent? And like, how did you get into the business at 10?
My parents had nothing to do with it. In fact, they were
Wow.
they were shocked when I told them I was doing a commercial.
Wow. What did you do? I mean,
There was a shoot happening nearby one day. I heard about a shoot, and I went down there, and I started yelling at people on the set to find who the person in charge was, and I got to the producer, and I was like, I want to get into the business, and I was 10. And the next thing you know, he's like, just to shut me up, he introduced me to this woman who was in casting, and then I got a call not too long later, and I've got an audition.
At your mom's phone number, I
My
imagine?
mom's house, and my mom answers the phone, and this woman wants to talk to me, and then we have a chat, and I hang up, and I tell my mom I have an audition the next day. And she's like, you're going to school? I go to school. I check myself out of school at 10. I get a neighbor to drive me to the audition. I book the gig.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, my parents were like, what? And this is a 10-year-old. And so then the next year we would go visit family in New York. And within a year, I was commuting to New York alone to do auditions at 11.
No way.
Yeah. So I was this entrepreneur.
I know an 11-year-old, and she's like this big.
Yeah. And she commuting to New York?
No, she lives in New York. I live in New York, so we're both.
Is she commuting to Detroit?
No. No, I guess, did you look like a 10-year-old? You must have.
No, I did not. I looked like a 7-year-old.
Really?
One of the reasons I worked more is because I was 10 and I had the brain of a 10-year-old, but I looked very, very young.
Wow.
So no, I was not the kind of kid you'd want walking Times Square in 1981 in New York City. Just not a healthy environment.
Were you not scared?
No.
Of safety?
No. Nothing happened back then. Everything was perfect.
Huh.
No kids got abducted in 1980.
Wow.
No problems.
Wow. So,
My parents were maniacs. What are we talking about here? Crazy people.
Were they?
Yes, people were abducted all the time back then.
Oh, wait.
All
Okay,
the
now I
time.
don't know your sense of humor. So they were abducted.
Not only were they abducted, but when I was a kid, maybe I was like maybe 7 or 8 or 9, there was a guy in Detroit, the Oakland County child killer.
Oh, I don't want to know.
This is a very famous,
taking off my headset.
very, very famous serial killer, and he was killing and abducting boys that were my age in my neighborhood.
Oh my God.
And my parents, there were no rules. Go ahead, it's all good.
Really?
Yeah.
So your parents knew you were going to New York at 11?
Yeah, they took me to the airport. They dropped me off, and I got on a plane alone.
Oh my God.
They said, have fun.
This
Don't
is
talk to
such a
anybody.
story. No wonder you got 5 Emmys. I'm not surprised. The interview's done. We get it. No, I'm kidding.
But then I started moving into news, and then I was like, all right, I got news. I won an Emmy for news.
Wait, hold on.
Oh,
what
okay.
did you do in New York? Did you booked a gig or was it an audition?
Tons. No, I would go like twice a month for a couple of years.
Wow.
Yeah, I would audition Broadway plays, movies, commercials.
So you would go to the audition. Would you check yourself into a hotel by yourself?
No, my family is originally from there, so I'd stay with my grandmother.
Oh, okay. That helps a little bit.
Oh, sure.
You went to your grandma's. Okay. There was some protection. I can't imagine
at night it was protection when I went to bed, but not in the day. I was roaming the streets alone.
Yeah, and I get scared roaming the streets of New York alone.
Yeah.
So I'm an adult. That's amazing. Okay, so you were doing the hustle. Were you thinking at the time, I'm going to become really famous? Like, look at me. None of my kids in school are doing this cool gig, but I'm flying to the city that Frank Sinatra was born in, pretty much. Technically, it's New Jersey, but...
Yeah, Hoboken. But my dad was a big Sinatra fan, so I was ingrained with Sinatra music all the time.
Cool.
There was always that. Certainly, I was aware of the possibility that I could get a job that would make me famous.
Wow.
I was mini famous in my school, because I was on TV. They would see me on TV, and so I was known for doing that kind of stuff.
Cool.
But I didn't feel any sense of fame. But there were moments where I was like, "Ooh, if I get this gig, I'm gonna be famous."
Wow.
For sure.
And you wanted that at such a young age.
I didn't necessarily want fame. In fact, I would say I've never wanted fame.
Okay.
I've avoided it until literally this moment as I'm here trying to get people to know me. I've just been about, I want to make my movies. I want to make my TV shows. I want to make my AI and VR and AR projects. I want to be respected. I want to do things that make people want to trust me and want to work with me, want to do business with me. And I want the internet to reflect that. So I try and put off what I believe is a serious partner. I think I'm a serious individual for people to do business with, whether it's a talent or it's an investor, whomever. But it's never really been about me because you would know me.
Yeah.
If I wanted to be famous, I'd be famous for sure.
I love that. So the reason why I have this podcast is because I think that it's so incredible to see people who had the self-belief that they could be anything that they wanted to be, that it didn't really matter what the odds were because they knew that they could defy it. And I feel like you have to have such an intense level of like mental discipline to not let the doubt settle in you, to keep going. And to have that at 10 years old, I wanted to be on the Disney Channel when I was 10 years old, and I was not on the Disney Channel. So you know how hard that is, because I feel like I'm a pretty ballsy person, and so that's incredible. And I'm curious, like, when you were 10 or 11, were you thinking like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life? Because that's a very different role to be an actor or on a commercial compared to being, because I assume you won Emmys for production, right? For the backside of the camera. Yeah,
I've been nominated for Emmys, Daytime Emmy for drama, best drama on the internet.
Wow, that's a big one.
That's a big one.
Yeah. What was the drama?
It was like a little short film I made.
Cool.
But it's kind of come on, best drama on the internet. Like, there's no way it's the best drama on the internet. Of course not. But it did get nominated.
Wow.
But I won a college Emmy, which was like winning the Heisman Trophy if you're a TV student. And then I won 2 Emmys for technology, and then I won sports Emmys. So I played in different parts of just the media part of TV, but I've worked in film and television. But what I learned at 10, what it made me want to do is, at first I understood discipline. I'd grown up in a very disciplined house. I was born and raised Irish Catholic, and my parents were like no joke about stuff. And I grew up with very serious manners and behavior, all the stuff that you would want to have. I had that instilled as a young kid. But you've heard the phrase, everyone wants to direct.
Yeah.
Like, the minute I was on a set and I could see how it was all done, and I could see the machine and what was happening, I understood discipline. I understood that all that money that's being spent and those cameras are pointing at me, I better deliver.
Wow.
Okay? And I better behave properly. So that was very important to understand business and behavior. I also saw the creative component of it, where a lot of people were just sitting around while this one guy was doing the stuff. He was running the show. And I was like, that seems like a good gig. The director, he comes in with a vision. He gets to do interesting things. I'm in the back of the Buick in the commercial. I'm thinking, guy, man, put the camera over here. It's a better shot. And I'm 10.
Yeah.
So I was thinking right away of the larger story. And so I thought more likely I'd become a director. And I shortly thereafter moved away from being a talent, because that's what I thought I wanted to do. When in the reality, I have directed movies and TV shows. But I really now, if you said, what am I? I'd say I'm a producer. Because I do all of it, and I produce the project from beginning to end. And I'm more often than not, I'm directing it or I'm writing it. I'm not really in it very often. I'm usually just writing or directing it. But that's what I wanted, was to be able to make the project happen. And then as I got older, I realized, well, it doesn't have to be a movie or TV. It can be any project. So I've built buildings. I've developed real estate.
Wow.
It's all the same. There's an idea, and I take it through the idea, and I bring the team together, and I get capital, and I find out what are the pain points for the various different people. How do I resolve what their issues are, get them to work together, and get whatever it is completed.
Wow. And
so I don't even think in entertainment. I think in ventures now. But I want to, before we jump too deep in that, I want to just pause for a second and give you a story that you're going to love.
Yes.
That goes with could I be famous?
Yeah.
Would I have been famous? And what I would have thought about that. And conscious choices. We all make choices in life. Mine are very conscious, and I'm happy with my choices. So putting the time period, it's 1990 as I set my water. I've won the National College Emmy for news.
Wow.
From a public access show that I had in the 80s, where I would interview B-52s or Deborah Harry or Lenny Kravitz, so they come through town, and I'm a teenager. This is before Wayne's World.
Wow.
And that movie Almost Famous, where that kid went on that?
Yeah, of course.
I did that 50 times.
Wow.
Okay, he did one.
Wow. Crazy.
And I did it because I wanted to get drunk with Billy Idol and hang out backstage. Like, this is what motivated me, was, being a teenager.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the journalism. It was just the experience of it.
Yeah.
And through that, I found journalism. Just like, okay, I'll figure out how to tell a story. And so I win the Emmy. I moved to LA at 20, and I'm like, I'm going to make it in LA. I'm going to be Spielberg. I'm going to do everything. It's going to be fantastic.
Wow.
And I, because I had been a reporter and because I had been an actor as a kid, I was able to get an agent. And I was in SAG and AFTRA, and I got this boutique agency that represented young people.
I have to say, was it easy for you to get an agent?
Yes.
Okay.
Very easy.
Okay.
Because I had tape.
Yeah.
I had videotape that I put in an envelope and I mailed it to somebody. I was like, here's my experience and here's my resume.
Because you started so young, and when you're young, you don't really need tape.
Correct. But I amassed it quickly.
Yeah.
And again, this cable show that I'd had, and I had hosted other things. And I had a decade of experience at that point.
Crazy.
And a lot of, big names, big brands, Bubble Yum, Ford Motor Company, like, Coca-Cola. I did a lot of ads. So this boutique agency represents young people. And I'm not really thinking about being a talent, but, maybe I get a hosting gig, like a game show or something is what I was thinking. I was more in that thought process than acting. And I'm in town for maybe 4 or 5 months of the summer, and I get called by NBC in Detroit, and they're like, hey, you want to be a reporter? And I'm like, yeah. Get in my car, drive back home, and about a month goes by, and the phone rings, and it's my agent in LA. And he says to me, hey, I got you a call back. And I was like, a call back? For what? Because I haven't been in LA in a month, and I don't even remember auditioning for anything at all. It must have been months before that. And I said, well, what is it? He says, it's this new TV show and this new network, and it's a role that's going to be a guest star. And for people who don't know what a guest star is the person comes in just in one episode. Mm-hmm. And they said maybe it could be a recurring character for like a 3 or 6 episode arc, which would mean the character would have a small role in these few episodes. Not a series regular, which is one who's in all the time.
Yeah. And
again, the show's brand new, so nobody knows what's going to happen. And so I said, oh, great, fly me out.
Why do I feel like this is going to be Friends or something? Okay. Is it? No.
It's 1990.
Okay.
Okay. Friends was 95, I think, something like that. So I said, buy me a ticket. And he's like, no, it doesn't work that way. You got to get your own ticket, come out. And I said, well, I can't do it. I'm busy. I'm making $75 a day as a reporter here, doing news stories. I'm not going anywhere. And then a few days later, he calls back and said, listen, they called again, and they asked about you. I think you should come out. Wow. And I said, look, same deal. You got to buy me a ticket or I can't do it. And he's like, well, that's not going to happen. I said, okay. And then a few days later, he calls and he says, listen, they really, really like you. They keep talking about you. And they said that you can audition there on tape. We'll send you the script and you just record it. So I'm in the kitchen. My mom's reading the script and recording me, and I'm doing my lines back and forth. And I'm sending it off to them. And then I don't hear anything. Week goes by, he calls back. He's like, listen, they love you, okay? They're narrowed down to 3 people, and you're going to network. And I was like, what does that mean? He's like, you're going to go into the meeting in the network, and they're all going to be there. The director, the producer, the network executive, everybody, and they're going to make the decision right then. Like, you'll audition, you go in the hallway, you come back, and they're like, so-and-so got the part.
Wow.
And I said, that's what I said. I was like, wow, that sounds like we're close.
Yeah.
And he says, yeah. And I said, well, fly me out. I don't have the money. I can't afford the ticket.
Yeah.
And
could you really not have afforded the ticket?
I don't think so.
Okay.
And the time, it would have been, it's just like for an audition.
Yeah.
But this network thing sounded like a thing. And I had never had experience with that. But I was just like, whatever, Anyway, I found out later that Luke Perry got the part of Dylan on 90210.
90210?
Yeah.
Dang. So, do you have remorse?
No, I do not have remorse.
Really?
No, for sure I do not. Because I wouldn't have wanted to have that kind of fame then. By the way, I wouldn't want that fame now. I don't ever want that kind of fame where you're localized to a specific type of product and content. This is the problem that happens with actors. This is why Matt Perry struggled after Friends, because he was Matt Perry of Friends. Yeah. And that's why that Luke Perry struggled. It's because he was Luke Perry.
Are they related? Side note?
Oh, no.
I'm confused.
No,
okay.
I don't think so.
Okay.
But in any event,
RIP,
Jason Priestley, what have you seen from him?
Yeah.
It's like these people were locked into these characters and these roles, and I would have never wanted to have
Frodo.
a part of that. Frodo, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So anyway, fun story, right?
That is a crazy story. So before you said this story, you were talking about how when you think about work now, you think about it as a venture and you think, basically, I'm competent enough to figure out what the problem is, what the idea is, what the solution is, how to get people to work together, how to get money. And I'm curious what you think your best skill set is to actually pull those things off. Because I think a lot of people, for example, like so many startups fail. Like a lot of people have big ideas, they have money, they have a team, and they're still not able to get it across the finish line. So what is it about you that you think is special and capable of completing that?
Well, I think there's two components to this, and I think they're both really critical. And I think if you looked at failed startups and failed businesses and failed individuals, I think you'd find that these two components are critical to what happens. And the first thing is the proper preparation, which is understanding the product, understanding the market. And it really comes down to one word for me: logical. Is this idea logical? And that can go down to, am I pitching the right network? I got this food show. Should I be pitching the History Channel? Probably not, unless it's a food history show, and even then it's a maybe. So finding out who the right buyer is there a market for it? Like that big sort of ideation process, people just go through it and they're like, bam, it doesn't matter. The logical component as we look at technology and things that are happening today, all these amazing tools are happening that you can make something, but you have to think, well, what else has to happen in the marketplace? What other inventions need to happen? How will the consumer adoption need to happen for this to work? And so that's one of the big problems is people they just have this idea, but it's at the wrong time or it's not developed properly. And so I'm very good at looking at an idea and leaping forward and saying, okay, this is not going to make it in the next 6 months because these 50 other things have to happen. And the timeline of those isn't going to happen for a while. And because I have such a varied background in business and media, I'm able to quickly identify situations, study it very quickly and say, all right, logically it can happen. Logically, it makes sense. All right, now let's look at the next part of it. Should we pursue it? And then once someone starts to pursue it, I feel like the failure happens often, which I'm an expert at. It's my best thing ever, which is pivoting. Pivoting is a science. You cannot start anything and expect it to go the way you want it to go. It will never happen that way. It's just how big of a pivot are you dealing with? Is it little things here and there where just you're pivoting your schedule? Or is it a teardown of the business before it even gets launched or even after you've launched it because you're like, it just isn't going to make it? And so I remove all emotion from business and I say, what makes sense? And then what needs to happen? And when you're changing your path or you have to let people go or you have to make tough decisions, people crumble then. Yeah. They don't have the strength to say, I was wrong. I can say I'm wrong, like I had a wrong plan and I have to adjust. If I don't adjust, then I was wrong. If I adjust, I've pivoted and I've remained in the open possibility world. So I'm always trying to look ahead. It's like you're driving your car and you can see down the street, well, there's an accident, where you're a passenger and you're like to the guy, get out of this lane. Can't you see that this is going to be backed up?
Yeah.
It's nothing worse than being on a team with people and 2 or 3 people can see ahead and say, this is going to crash. We need to stop it. And you're just driving over the cliff. Yeah. So when you realize it's not working, find out why, and then have the self-confidence to say, we need to do something. And that's where people crumble.
Wow. That's so profound. What is your relationship with failure? Because I feel like a lot of people have a dream and they're going towards it and they're like, oh, shoot, this isn't working. I failed.
Yeah.
But if you're pivoting, in a way, you have to accept that you failed faster than the other person. Like it's almost that you have to let go of the original dream quicker in order to change paths, which some people might actually view as a failure of that particular dream. So how do you navigate that? And how do you take your emotions out of it?
Yeah, well, I think the way you just explained it is perfect. Because, and then that's where I come in my justification in my brain. It's not a failure because it hasn't been completed. So every time I pivot, it's not like I look back and say, oh, I failed at that. I'm just like, it's now moving this way. It's moving this way. So a key component is positivity. Failure doesn't exist in my vocabulary. I don't fail at anything. It simply is still developing. Any project that hasn't made it to the finish line, even if I started it 20 years ago, it just hasn't finished. I put it on the shelf. I stopped doing it at that moment in time. Who knows? Maybe I'll come back to it. Maybe I won't. It's unfinished. It's not. It didn't get mature or whatever. But I don't look at anything as a failure.
Yeah.
And so it's when you critique yourself and say I failed, that's when you start to feel bad about things.
Yeah.
And you have to accept that if, again, you want to use failure, it's fine. That failure is a part of cost of doing business. So if we use the word failure, I failed 1 billion times. I've failed more than anybody. Like all day I'm failing.
Yeah.
But I am continuing to learn from that and adjust. And so I don't look at an unfinished project as failure. I just say, well, it didn't reach maturation at that moment in time for unknown reasons, or maybe now with the viewpoint of history, we can look back at a clear lens and say, oh, okay, this is why it didn't work then. Maybe it will never work again, or maybe it's something we should revisit now.
Yeah.
Everything's cyclical: fashion, business, trends, industry. So maybe it wasn't in the right cycle. But for me, it's part mental, and it's part just I'm always moving forward. Just there's more opportunity, and so I got 50 things going at a time.
That's so interesting. What's your relationship, if I'm allowed to ask this, with money and survival? Because I think a lot of the time people are scared to fail specifically because they think that if they get that like notch in their reputation where it's like, oh, that person failed, they won't be able to get the next gig. And also, if you invest a lot of resources into a project and it doesn't turn out the way you want, there's an actual risk there. There's like actually something on the line. So like, how are you able to navigate that and just like brush it off your shoulder? It's
a really good question, and I hope people are really understanding the depth that you just went to, because there's and I appreciate you asking if you even can ask that question, because it is a sensitive question. But I'm here to be honest. I'm honest with everybody. I take huge risks, enormous risks, and through my career, as I've done that, I thought of those two things. One, this could, in some cases, this could put me out. This could really knock me out bad. And if it's not done correctly, this could hurt my reputation. So those two things that you say, I've experienced simultaneously many, many times. You know what they say, you got to spend money to make money. And oftentimes...
So true, by the way. I'm learning that in my life.
It's a fact. It just is. The more money I've had, the more I could do things, because, you can multitask, you can hire people, you can throw money at problems, and money solves problems, for sure. But in that in-between stage, and for many people here, the bit in-between is all the time where you're trying to get it going, you have to have a certain amount of capital moving things forward, just keeping it happening, or maybe you need to have some partners creating some things, even if it's a little bit of money. And the little bit of money for somebody could be a lot of money. We're all on a sliding scale. If I said spending $100 a week, for people that could be crushing, and they're like, I can't do that. Someone else, I'm like, you got to spend $1,000 a week, and they're like, I can't do that either. So I recognize that component, and the money component I've sort of disassociated with money in my brain a long time ago. Again, I'm not a person who needs things. I don't care about fame. I don't care about materialistic things. My wife likes to have some nice things, so I'm working for my wife.
So cute.
I like experience.
We love a man who works for his wife.
Well, I am, and I'm so happy with my wife.
This is a room full of women to the cameras out there.
I'm the luckiest guy in the world. That I have the wife that I have, and if that's my cost of business is making money for her, great. But for me, I don't really care about it. But I do care about it for her. So that is something that I'm careful with. Again, is my project logical? And that ties into the next part of it. Was my project logical? So if it doesn't cross the finish line, and I meet up with someone earlier that I gave a heavy sell to, and I was like, you got to do this. And they're like, yeah, buddy, that didn't happen. I've developed it so well, and my pitch was so good, that they're not looking at me with anger or trying to knock me down. And if they asked about it, I say, yeah, I'm still working on that. Or it's still being devised in some way. So
you don't mind the uncomfortable conversation?
There's no uncomfortable conversation with anybody.
I agree with that.
Anybody, nothing. And again, at this point in my career, my past speaks for itself. And the people who have seen me and experienced me, they know it can take years to develop certain projects. There's projects I'm working on now that I started in 2016.
Wow.
It's 7 years. And when I see people and they're like, how's that going? I'm like, I'm still working on it. I'm waiting for certain things to happen. And I don't feel like there's haters that are like, he didn't do it. Because I'm honest with people. And I think that kind of authenticity, that saves your representation, people or your reputation. People are like, he's just trying to do a good thing and he's not hurting anybody. People just appreciate that. So be a good person.
I love that. Was there ever a time where you did make a mistake, hit rock bottom, and you were like, how am I going to get credibility to do my next project? Did that ever happen to you?
Yeah. That's why I'm on this
podcast
today.
I love it. It's actually very true.
I am at rock bottom right now. No.
That's so funny. But I think that it's so true that actually to get to the top, you have to hit rock bottom at least once, if not multiple times, because I actually think if you don't, then you're probably not taking the kinds of risks that you need to.
All right. Well, let me give you a scenario.
Cool.
And then on a scale of a rock bottom, you rate it. How's that?
Cool.
Play a little game.
Love it.
I love game shows.
I love games. We're going to do games after this.
This is a new game show that I've just come up with the format now.
Nice.
Okay?
I love it.
And you determine it's rock.
And we'll see if it makes an Emmy.
It's called Rock Bottom.
You're six.
Okay, so anyone out there that tries to steal my show, we all know it.
Neil made it.
It's called Rock Bottom. You ready?
Okay, sure.
You tell me if this is rock bottom.
Cool.
All right. Or where it is in the scale.
Okay.
So I'm 20.
I'm going to turn it around afterwards and I'll tell you some lows of my life. You can tell me if it was rock bottom.
Tell me if this is good.
Okay, good.
Okay. I have a million of them, but I'm just going to give you one right now and I'll think of some more.
Cool.
So 20-year-old Neil moves to LA. He's got his little college Emmy. He's like, oh, I'm going to be somebody. Gets his little acting agent. That's the plan, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I land here, and it's 1990. Drive out here, 1990. And I have no place to live. Mm-hmm. My sister knew a guy who knew a guy. And I'd called this guy, and I was like, hey, can I stay at your place? And I'm from Michigan, too. And he's like, what? Who is this guy? He's like, all right, you can stay for a night. And I was like, okay. And I pull into Hollywood, and he's on Mansfield and Lexington. Mm-hmm. All right, and this is 1990. Very dangerous. It's
Still is
it's
dangerous.
sketchy now,
okay.
Yeah, for sure. Although there's that new Tesla burger place is going to be there, and they just built something there, so it's getting to be gentrified. And that area south of that orange area is really hip and happening. A lot happening there. But then it was just terrible. Park my car, go into this guy's apartment. I come out the next day. Car is broken into. Everything I have is stolen.
Whoa.
Welcome to LA.
Wow.
Windows smashed.
Wow.
So I go and I get what at the time was called the internet. Mm-hmm. But I had to wait. The internet was called the recycler back then. Mm-hmm. You know the recycler?
No.
Craigslist?
Yeah.
So Craigslist was an actual piece of paper.
Oh. And
you would go buy it at the newsstand and it would have all that stuff in it. It was a thick newspaper. Once a week it came out. Huh. The thing here was called the recycler. It's the same business.
Cool. Came
out on Thursdays. And in the recycler would be all the crazy stuff you'd see in Craigslist. Stuff for sale, things like that. Rooms for rent, apartments for rent. But I had to wait a week to get the recycler. So I slept in my car.
Your broken into car with the cracked windows.
No cracked, gone window.
Gone window.
So I'm sleeping in my car and it's in April. It's cold at night. LA's like a desert.
Yeah.
And I'm sleeping in the streets in Hollywood.
In Hollywood? You didn't even move the neighborhood?
I didn't even know what anything was. I didn't know anything.
Oh, man.
So a week goes by, and I get the recycler, and I go through it, and there's this room for rent in Beverly Hills, $500. So I go to Beverly Hills, 1990. I show up there, and it's a house in the flats, kind of like the ugliest house on the street. And I meet this lady, and she shows me the room. But the room itself is not for rent. Okay, there's a mattress that I'm going to share with another man.
What?
And in her house.
In what world do you do that? I would rather
in my rock bottom world. So please stay with my party show here, right?
Okay.
So the living room has bed sheets hanging from the ceiling, quartering off the room, and on the ground are just mattresses and smoldering cigarettes and loose men's shoes. It's like a 1920s Singaporean opium den. Mm-hmm. And then I get to the room with this mattress, and I meet the other guy. And she's like, the two of you guys are going to sleep at $250 now for each of us, so $500 total. So I live in this room, in this house full of young men sleeping on mattresses, and I have to share a mattress. I'm not talking like one night I get it and he gets it. We slept together in the bed.
How big was the mattress?
It was a full mattress.
Okay.
Smaller than a queen.
Pretty small.
So it goes twin, full, queen, king. Well, not everybody knows.
Okay.
And we were both grown men.
Oh,
I was
man.
20, he was 20. And so I'm going to go with rock bottom. Where scale of 1 to 10? Where's that rock bottom?
That's definitely like 0.
0. Okay.
0.
Rock bottom.
I have another one. I have one that can kind of beat, and maybe not beat that, but I'm a girl, so you have to keep that in mind. And granted,
Sure.
I'm a black belt. I did 10 years of martial arts, but this actually was not even that long ago. I had just decided to move to New York. I was staying at a friend's house for a month. He said that his roommate was going up to the Hamptons. He gave me a free place to stay. I still had my apartment in LA. And my cousin had introduced me to some guy that she knew very randomly. I went and grabbed dinner with him. He's basically like bragging about how successful he was, how he has this like amazing place in the Lower East Side. I didn't know anything about New York neighborhoods at the time. And he's like, by the way, if you ever need a place to stay, I have a nice guest room. You can like stay in the guest room. I was like, okay, cool. Ironically, the next day, my friend texted me and he was like, hey, my roommate actually has to come back tomorrow for work for the remainder of the month. He needs his room back. And I was like so glad that this man had even let me stay in his apartment, which was like next door to Taylor Swift's house for free for like, 3 weeks. I couldn't say no or like, let me sleep on your couch. So I texted my cousin's friend and I was like, hey, can I like crash on your couch, or not your couch, but go into your guest bedroom? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. I show up, the neighborhood, I actually was dropped off at night there. It's a really rough neighborhood. Like the whole neighborhood, I was like, this is weird. I go into his apartment and it was not a guest bedroom. It was like you take these steps up and there's this whole second floor and there's a curtain and it's his room, and there's a curtain and it's the guest bedroom. And I'm a black belt, but I cannot promise myself to do karate if I'm asleep and somebody just like, does whatever while I'm sleeping. Like, what am I supposed to do? So I didn't know what to do. I like somehow forced myself to stay up all night. And I think like at 6 a.m, I finally fell asleep with like a pen in my hand. Cause I was like, at least if he like, I don't know, does something weird, I can like poke his face with this pen or something. And the next day I like called my brother. I begged him like, can I please, like he has a tiny studio apartment at the time. I was like, can I stay at your place? I'm biking home at midnight from a meeting, my last day in New York before going to get my stuff to officially move to New York. And I, long story short, like witnessed a murder on my way to his place in Brooklyn. And I was like, fuck. I don't know. I think that's pretty, I think you can rate that on the rock bottom scale, but I think that's pretty bad.
It's a good story. And then you're like, I can't wait to move to New York.
Yeah.
Right.
I moved back 3 days later,
Okay.
but never, I think it took me like a year to go to Brooklyn.
Yeah.
So what would you rate it?
Oh, it sounds pretty good. I'm going to go to the bottom with that one. Sounds pretty
0? Okay, good.
Yeah, for
that was
sure.
like a year and a half ago.
And again, part of rock bottom is how do we feel about it?
Yeah.
Like at the time, I didn't feel like I was a rock bottom. Now I look at it, I'm like, damn, that was low.
I
I've seen a
felt
lot
like
of people that have lived in Hollywood and made it over the years. I don't know anyone who slept with another man that long.
Heterosexually, at least.
Yeah, well, it seems unique, right?
Yeah.
Have you heard of that before?
Yeah, no.
But there's a little small caveat to the story.
Okay.
So I'm standing in the kitchen one time with her, and all these there's like 15 guys that are in this house, and Elena was a lady, and she's smoking, and she's got this cigarette with this like long 3-inch ash, and I'm boiling a potato because that's all I could afford was a potato.
Yeah.
Not even a big one. And so I'm just boiling it, watching it boil, and she's smoking her cigarette with her ash lingering over my pot of water, and she's like, "What are you doing here? What's your story?" And I was like, I'm here to make it. I'm going to be somebody. And she's like, smoking her cigarette. She's like, "You're not going to be anybody. You're going to fail. You're going to get out of here. Everybody fails." And I was like,
hate
"What?"
people like that.
I was like,
Actually, I love people like that. They make you push harder.
I was like, "Everybody?" She's like, "Everybody." I said, nobody's ever made it." She's like, "One guy got a pilot, and then it didn't go, and then he failed, and he went home. But you'll be gone." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And so years of working and struggling and having some successes, I've always thought about that lady because her house is right there, just near Wilshire and Robertson area.
Wow.
And the pandemic happens, and I've just done so many things in my life, and it's like a week, maybe a month after the pandemic, we were driving around, my wife and I was just talking about it. I was like, oh yeah, we're near Elena's house. She's like, let's go see her. And I was like, what? She's like, yeah, let's go see her. And so we go to the house, and her car is there. And this is just like a couple of years ago. Her car is there. It's covered in dust, but it's still the old car. House looks like it, could use a paint job, but it's still holding up. I knock on the door, and this very odd-looking guy opens the door. There's no mattresses. There's just like 100, maybe more than that, hundreds of Jesus and Mary paintings in the living room, all like him as a baby, and Mary's holding Jesus.
Wow. And
I said to the guy, I said, is Elena here? And he says, oh, yeah, she's let me see. She's in another room. Let me ask her. I said, tell her Neil is here. I used to live here. And she goes, not like she didn't know my name, obviously. Yeah. This is 2 years later.
Yeah.
And so, I can hear him talking to her, and she's like, get him out of here, whoever that guy is. And she comes back. And he's like, well, she's not available now. Can I take a message? And I said, yeah, can I write something down? And he says, yeah, I get a piece of paper and pen. I write down my name. And I said, I'd like you to take this to Elena with a computer and search my name on the internet and tell Elena that I made it.
Just got chills.
And that was it. And then the next day, the guy emails me, and he's like, oh my God, I looked you up. You're right. You made it. Would you buy some of my art?
Love that.
Which I wish I had bought now.
No.
Then I'd have it to really book in the story.
That's a really great story. I love that. Okay, we're going to do some rapid fire questions. Then we're going to play a little game.
Okay.
The first question. Ooh. What are 3 of the most important life lessons?
Oh boy, 3 important life lessons. Okay. My father passed just after my 18th birthday.
Wow.
He had been ill for a number of years. So I really didn't have teenage years with my dad. And so that was interesting because like my memories of him have really faded. But there's a handful of things that he told me that are real, like real. So he said, never get married until you're over 29. I stand by that. Mm-hmm. Certainly if you live in a city someplace, and if you're an entrepreneur, you're doing things, it's just, I feel like, until you're 29, you're still developing in many ways. Something kind of happens after 28 where you just it just becomes a different level playing field. There's this developmental process that I feel like people don't really account for it. And there's a great article in the New York Times a few years ago that says, what's happening with the 20-somethings? You should check it out. It's a pretty good article. So I like that. That's a good piece of advice. He said, if you can ever get a redhead, they're special. And I was not looking to meet a redhead, and I met my wife, and when I fell in love with her, I was like, wait a minute, you're a redhead. I hadn't even made the connection. So that was
really
the thing.
Interesting.
And he's right. Not that there's anything wrong with your dark hair. You're very pretty.
Great lesson. Thank you.
But redheads, she's special.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if they're all special, but it turned out the one I got was special.
I love that.
And what else would be a good? God, I've just had so much advice. I just don't take it personal. Mm-hmm. Negativity, when people they critique me or they're negative, I don't take anything personally. I try and compartmentalize how other people are feeling and just say, is this me? Am I a part of whatever they're delivering to me, or is it things that is not something I can control?
Yeah.
Because, what's going on in other people, you have no idea.
Yeah.
So many things. You have no idea what is making them behave the way they are in that particular moment, whether it's on a set or it's in business or it's in life, or it's at the gas station, whatever. So I try not to take it personally. Anything that comes at me from people, and then just trying to do an assessment. Is there something I can do? And if there isn't, I just accept whatever is happening in that moment, make note of it, and then if I see that person again or that situation happens again, I'd make note of it and say, okay, is this a consistent thing now? Or, is this person, is it them? Is it me? And so just not taking things personally is an important thing because I feel like we all get so much baggage of, I don't want to be around that person because they're negative or this and that. And I just be like, that's just who they are.
Yeah.
It's not coming at me. They just, their tone is off or their face, the way they look at me, it's not personal.
Yeah.
And even if it is personal, I discount it because I'm like, all right, you have this thing it's not me.
Yeah.
I don't need to feel a certain way or be angry. But you can continue to be weird and whatever I don't care.
Yeah.
And so I think removing that And learning that at a young age, don't take it personally. Just get up, do it again. Just keep working and be a good person. And that's it.
I love that. Where do you find your inspiration from? Like, what are you reading? What are you listening to? Because I feel like you have such a strong headspace.
Well, I'm reading media news all the time. I don't watch videos, really. People watch YouTube and Snapchat. I don't look at any of that stuff. Or TikTok, never. I read articles. I follow a lot of science and politics. I follow politics. And it can be very stressful, obviously, anyone that follows politics, because there's so much drama and turmoil happening. But I have followed news now for my whole life, and I've been a big fan of history. So I really start looking for those cycles in media and in business and in entrepreneurship. And so, whether it's fashion or it's food or it's travel, and I travel a lot. I've been to 126 countries.
Wow. So
with that kind of base travel, I understand the cup of coffee, cost of that. I understand a beer, what that cost. And I understand a club sandwich, what that would look like in a foreign country. And by the way, that's one of the safest dishes you can get, because a club sandwich is a club sandwich everywhere. Most things people can screw up, but they won't do that. But by understanding these very basic economic indicators, I'm able to extrapolate larger things in their economy and their happiness and their spending power.
Yeah.
And so I look for that thing. What does a taxi ride cost in a country?
Or my thing is, oh my gosh, my voice. Is the cost of a hotel.
Yeah.
I feel like you can see like the difference
Definitely.
in at least like the weight of the USD by like looking at hotels. That's really interesting.
Yeah. But even then, that's something that's marketed to us. So if like Mexico, if you go to Mexico, you'll find that they price things at the U.S. prices because U.S. people are lazy, and they'll go there, be like, oh, I feel like I'm just, south of the border and I'm paying the same prices, but I'm not getting the same service. They won't employ as many people, and they just don't give you the same you're getting. Where if you went to Thailand and you paid, $100 for that room and it's much cheaper, you're going to get 10 times the service. So I try and look at it. How are they spending their money on their stuff? They're not buying a hotel room, but they are getting a cup of coffee, they are taking a taxi, and they are getting a beer. And so how do they spend their money? That's what I look for.
Love that. Okay, a couple more questions. One of the things that you have done is you produce a Super Bowl in virtual reality.
Yeah.
What was like the biggest challenge and biggest reward for producing such a high profile event?
Of the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
Well, the reward is what you just said. I was the first to produce the Super Bowl. That's the reward.
Cool.
Being able to say that. And then what does that entail? Well, I figured out ways of telling spherical stories that could be used on a mobile phone and like YouTube as a 360 video. And to do that, you don't put a camera up in the stands, which is what I saw a lot of people doing. You have to be able to get it down onto the field and have it be a certain perspective of distance between people, where it would work on the phone as well as in the VR goggles. And so the achievement for me is, I got the sentence that says he's the first to do it, but I learned how to do it, and I made a good product that the NFL said, let's work with this guy. And so that means that I taught myself spherical storytelling because nobody else had done it before.
Wow.
And so that's what's cool about that is I taught myself how to do it. I then was able to sell it, and then I did it, and we're able to say that I did do it. And so I look at the last sentence that I did it, and then what happened, how to happened to be, I worked really hard.
Wow. That's amazing. If you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would you say?
Chill.
I love that. And last and final question, what is one thing under your covers that most people don't know about you?
Under my covers in my bedroom?
No, like under your, what's something that most people don't know about you?
Well, nobody knows me, so it's going to be easy. I mean, I'm not famous. So let's see what people don't know about, or I guess what they couldn't find on the internet if they searched me.
Yeah.
Man.
Well, I feel like you said it when you said you've been to 105 countries.
26.
Wait, what?
126.
126?
Yeah.
126
countries. Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, but that's on the internet. Like I pushed that, so like
you push that angle.
You would see that because I think it's important, It shows that I've made an effort. Like you don't accidentally go to 126 countries.
Yeah.
Years of my life traveling Many years I'd be gone 6 months of the year, but I'd be selling TV shows and movies that would let me travel so I could continue to stay and shoot movies and make it pay for itself.
So cool.
So what's a secret? A secret, right? That nobody knows. Let me tell you a secret. I don't know. My bank coach, I give you that.
No.
I don't know. Give me.
I feel like I have one question that I
subject.
can swap out for this because I
Okay.
actually feel like I'm dying to know the answer.
Okay.
If somebody could give you a paycheck for $1 million every year and you did not have to work, you didn't have to do any of these projects, would you rather do that, or would you rather do all the work that you've done and will continue to do, but let's just say at like the financial reward of like $50,000 a year?
Wait a minute. So I have two choices. I can get $1 million a year and not work,
Yeah.
or I get $50,000 a year and I can work.
And you can keep all of the like accolades that you've
But
already
can I
done.
make more money in my 50,000, or am I limited to 50,000?
You're limited to 50,000.
Well, how about we go for the option C, which is I take no money from anybody,
okay.
and I do whatever I'm going to do, and then I get to keep all the money I make.
There you
Because
go.
that's my choice, is option C. $1 million is not enough money.
Wow.
50,000. If $1 million is not enough, 50,000 is definitely not enough. Okay.
Wow.
And $1 million is not enough. I can make more than $1 million.
Wow.
If I can't see $1 billion, I'm not interested in these days. And I told you earlier that I don't care about money. So why do I want $1 billion? Well, two reasons. One, I don't want to have to think about money. $1 billion's way more than $1 million would be plenty for me not to think about money. But I can give it away. Think about the way I could live my life if I made enough money that I could focus on giving it away and impacting other things that I could produce. Remember, producing is not just a television show.
Yeah.
A building is producing. How about people and the way I could impact their lives and how I could change cultures?
Yeah.
Remember, I've spent decades understanding the world. There's a lot of ways I want to deploy money, and I don't want to have to deal with people about raising it. So if I made a ton of money through whatever I'm creating, the whole new business of Neil is giving the money away. And it's a whole new path of life. And I'm hoping I can get there. And I think the next 2 years, to be honest, because I'm so far ahead in AI and AR and VR, I think I got a couple things that are big.
Wow.
And I don't know if it's $1 billion, but it's more than $1 million a year. And then I'm going to give it away.
I love that. Well, Neil, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been an absolute privilege. And I will say that one thing I really admire and respect about you is the fact that just met you, obviously, but I can tell that your spirit of confidence and vision is so strong that nothing could get in the way of you accomplishing what you set out to accomplish, even those pivots along the way. And I feel like it's obvious why you have the success that you have. And I really respect you for that.
Very kind of you to say that and have me on the show. Thank you.
Of course, my pleasure.